This panel is titled Powering Growth Through Entrepreneurship. And throughout the conference, there's been a lot of discussion about growth, private sector, what governments in the region can do and have been doing to encourage businesses either to come set up or to start up. The GCC, especially in Dubai and Riyadh, have been at the forefront of attempting to create an ecosystem for startups that has the right funding, the right regulation, attracting talent, and most importantly, retaining that talent. And Qatar has joined in with the recent announcement of the $1 billion fund of funds. I will turn to Dr. Mohsin. Welcome. I wanted to, perhaps you can share your thoughts on the vision of the fund of funds and what you want it to do for Qatar and perhaps the region.
Absolutely. Thank you, Donna, and thank you for your time today. Look, I mean, it's an exciting announcement made by our Prime Minister earlier in the year at the Web Summit. I think it reflects an understanding of the evolution of venture technology within both Qatar and in this region. So the announcement really was made on the basis of a long understanding and following of developments in this region. And when we look at demographics and we look at the technology that is coming out of this region from our neighbors, including Saudi, Egypt, UAE, and within the vicinity, we felt that there are a number of potential gaps that the QIA could play a role in filling when it comes to funding and helping kickstart and contribute towards development. This also ties in with our national vision as part of the Qatar national vision in terms of a focused effort on attracting venture funder funds to catalyze entrepreneurs within this region from our international relationships that we hold. So as QIA, we have fostered over the many years long-standing partnerships that have interests in this region in terms of portfolio companies, whether that be based in the GCC or in the periphery, and using Doha as a springboard to allow these groups to come here and organically grow their business footprint in this region and make use of the fantastic infrastructure and digital connections that we have was a win-win in our view. So the announcement, I think more details are available now on the website. And so I'd encourage anyone that is looking to participate in this program. The details on application are now available. We are assessing potential opportunities, both from a commercial and a development goal. So we are ideally looking for groups and funds that have established track records in managing fund of funds capital, but at the same time are committed to helping to be part of that nascent ecosystem in Qatar and helping us to connect the dots between Doha and the other capital cities in the GCC. So importantly, this is an important step towards building bridges and engaging with like-minded entrepreneurs to help meet that collective goal across the block. So maybe I'll stop there.
And from a mega fund of funds, I would like to turn to Dr. Shaikha. You are setting up the first VC fund in Qatar. For the sake of this panel and for everyone here, walk us through your experience there. What were the challenges? Who helped you? Who made it easy? And who made it difficult?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dana. Actually, we have, before starting this Rasmal fund, we have started an angel investment club. It was incorporated in the QFC, and we started this long time back, and during the time of the blockade, because at that time we thought that Qatar is behind when it comes to VC and startup ecosystem. And myself, a group with with other 14 Qatari founders, we have established Doha Tech Angel, and it was incorporated in QFC. And we have started to look and to help the startup in Qatar, but then we found that there wasn't enough startup that can be, invest in. So we looked at the region, and we've been opportunistic when we look at the outer, world. Then we thought that, we need to do more for the ecosystem. It's not only focusing on the very early stages. We agree that early stages, they needed fund to test their ideas, to experiment, and and to fail and to learn from their failure. We thought that we need to think of establishing a VC fund in Qatar. And at that time, there wasn't the regulation that supports establishing a VC fund within Qatar. So we worked very closely, myself and partners, with the government, QFC, and to help us to establish this fund. Actually, I'd like to mention at this point that Qatar Development Bank had been like one of the enablers to start the dialogue with the government. And it took us a while. Actually, regulations are not easy. We are, the first fund. We learn, and also the regulator, learn, and we try to learn from this journey. So we managed to incorporate the management company. It's incorporated in QFC, and it's called Rasmal Ventures. And then we started to work on the fund. The fund, it also needs another requirement from the regulatory point of view. You need to secure, you need to define your procedures. These procedures must be vetted by the regulator, and there is a very long list of procedures, and at the end you need to appoint a lawyer to help you in establishing all of these entities. This is in addition to have, a fund, administrator. We are, Rasmal Venture is going to manage the fund, but at the same time, we need to make that, our process are, adhere to the compliance required by the regulator, so we need to hire an administrator or a custodian. So we are on the very last stages of closing, small requirement or tweaking with the fund, and also to secure the first anchor investor. And we will, once this is, we close all the, opening issues, we are going to announce it.
Well, you've come a long way, and mabruk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Speaking of VCs here, Jack, I'd like to turn to you to ask a question about, is there enough VC funds that are diverse enough? In the region, lots of startups say the VC funds are not looking at seed funding, but more early stage, more pre-IPO fit, because it's just an easier buck here, and it's not a long-term investment. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the glass half full interpretation of kind of the VC landscape here in MENA, from what I can tell, and I've been coming here for a while, is that it's almost like a Field of Dreams movie analogy, in the sense that if you build it, they will come. And so Mohsin actually made a comment. We were doing an event last week in Los Angeles, something to the effect that if you drop a pinpoint here in Doha and you go out, say, 2,000 miles in any direction, it's something crazy like a third of Earth's population lives within that circle. And so this place should be the hub for where those folks get funded from. And so from that perspective, as you build it, so whether it's Shaikha's fund or the other people here in the region, I would be very bullish long term as it builds out.
That's good. Ru, in our conversation before this panel, we talked about the ecosystem, and you call it the startup economy. How do you see the ecosystem here in the region, and how does it fare in comparison with the rest of the world?
I think that, first of all, you have to compare the ecosystem not to its partners within the region, but globally, right? Because you're trying to attract global finance and global talent in its own right. I think that what makes the ecosystem here very attractive, in particular in Doha and Qatar, is that money is a commodity in a sense. It's an important one, right? But what you're looking for is talent and people and coordination. The hardest thing to build a startup economy is to actually make sure you're serving the entrepreneur's journey at every stage of growth. And that service is about money and investment and diversified types of capital. It's also about talent and regulatory systems. And I feel in my experience here in Qatar and my work here is that they've thought through the journey from beginning to end, from the moment an entrepreneur has an idea to the moment that they start building for scale and looking for other geographies outside of Qatar and outside of the region to scale into. And I think that level of strategic thought is unusual. And I think it's very, very important to build a long-term sustainable economy here.
That's good. Dr. Mohsin, whether in the region or abroad, with your partners in the fund of funds, what sectors are you eyeing now? What is representing, you think, an opportunity? Is it AI, as with the trend now? Are there any traditional sectors that you could be eyeing for investment?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think technology, AI will continue to be an important driver of innovation. I think we are at an early stage. And as His Excellency Mansour pointed out at an earlier opening panel stage, QIA is constantly looking and studying at the space to partner up with winners. I think that dispersion in who those winners will be is yet to be determined. QIA has a long-standing history of investing in venture across outside of AI, including the peripheral plays around AI in terms of data, cloud computing and the infrastructure, turning away from those types of technology around e-commerce, around health tech, around education plays and ed tech. These will all form part of the priority sector that we are looking to attract the venture fund of funds program that's been announced. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to look into non-AI initiatives, be that in food security, agri-tech, health tech, biomedical advances, and we would welcome conversations across each of those.
Interesting. I want to stay on the money before I turn to entrepreneurship and culture. And Jack, here I want to ask you about the so-called funding winter in VCs. Too many VCs, too many startups. We had B Capital on Bloomberg TV earlier today on a panel, and they were speaking a lot about this. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think it's all, it's a function of the interest rate environment. And so money was basically easy/free for 13 plus years after the financial crisis. So there were asset bubbles that were created in all different sectors, and technology certainly was one of those. And technology, I think, was a double whammy in the sense because interest rates were essentially zero. People overly invested in tech because they were reaching for yield, because tech is usually associated with growth. And so it made the asset bubble within tech and VC even larger than some of the other sectors. And so now that the cycle has turned, it's a great time to have the money. So Mohsin's in a great spot with the new fund of funds program. It's not so great a time if you're looking for the money. So whether you're a company or a newer fund, the fundraising environment is just very, very hard. And what also is going on behind the scenes, at least within kind of US venture capital circles, is that the vintage from 2019, 2020, 2021, kind of the top of the market from a valuation perspective, those companies are finally going to be coming back to the market in mass starting the second half of this year, definitely in 2025. And these companies are they're either going to be marked down massively, they're going to get merged by their venture capital owners, or they're going to go bust. And so that doesn't necessarily affect what we do as early stage venture capitalists, but the sentiment is going to get dark, and it's going to be with us for a while. So to kind of sum it up, I think this environment is going to be tough, but at the same time, Rue and I were talking about this earlier, as an investor, this is a great time to invest. Everything is essentially a tailwind. The wind is at our back. This is when the next PayPal or the next Google or the equivalents get started. So as an investor, it's a fantastic time.
Mm-hmm. But the funding winter will probably stay for another year, you would say?
I would predict that it's easily with us through the end of next year, if not longer. I mean, there has to be a commensurate amount of time. Interest rates were 0 for 13 years, and they're going to be 5% for just a couple of years. There has to be some commensurate balance between how cheap money was for so long and how relatively expensive it is now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I want to turn into entrepreneurship, the essence of it, and culture. And I am from the region, and sometimes, you find it hard to imagine a Sam Altman coming out of the region or an open AI. And I want to see that, as I'm sure this is why we have the QIA backing this fund of funds, or we have PIF in Saudi also backing a lot of VC funds. We want to see these coming out. Dr. Shaikha, how can we do that? What are we not doing right?
Well, it's a very hard question, and I don't have an answer to it. This morning we attended a session about innovation, and they were discussing, this issue and how we can resolve this debacle. I think it's not easy, but it should start. It's a journey. It should start early on from education. I think there should be, should be focus on education in STEM, like a program. And this morning, I like the candidate who came from, I think, he is from, I forget his firm. He established this organization in Africa to nurture, a new talent. And what he said, ask the student not to what he wants to learn, give him a problem and ask him how to solve it. So one of the things that I think missing is critical thinking and problem solving. Most of our education is based around instruction. Do this and do that, and we don't have, people who can think out of the box. So this is one thing. The other thing, I believe, apart from education, it's the culture. I think, actually, in our culture, we usually don't accept failure. We penalize people who fail. At some point of time, and even if you look at the regulation, our regulation doesn't also, encourage, people to try or to test their new ideas. So if a company, failed to pay, the bill, and most of the, jurisdiction, founders end up to be, in jail. So we need to have, a bankruptcy, law to protect, the founders and the startup partners. The other thing, it has to do also with money. Yes, we have, this country, this region has so many resources. We are blessed to have, surpluses from hydrocarbon, revenues. But because we are risk averse, people usually don't, invest in these startups and in these ideas. So we prefer to invest in well-established, let's say, companies or real estate. So we need to have the VC mindset. I think the QIA fund, $1 billion fund will help to attract, VCs and the startups to the region. And usually whenever you have VC, you have prosperity when it comes to innovation and to new, and to entrepreneurship. So this is one thing. The other thing, I think that though here we have so many universities who are doing a lot of research when it comes to a new idea and new research, but it is disconnected. It is disconnected from the private sector. So research usually ends to be in a research. So we need to have more collaboration between the government, research center, and private sector, because the private sector will be able to transfer or to take the idea from the research from inception or from research into a successful business. So I think these are, in a nutshell, that what we need, to have in order to have a Qatar Sam Altman. I think. But
Exactly.
it's a long
I
journey.
think you nailed it on its head. It is early education, critical thinking. It is allowing people to fail, and that is okay. This culture, we don't have it in the region. When a company goes bankrupt is such a huge deal, and the legacy stays. It stays with the businessman. It stays even with the employees who worked at the company, and there were so many examples of that. And thirdly, of course, the R&D and taking that to the next stage. Ru, I'd like to take your insight on this, because I know we speak a lot, and you're very passionate about the whole idea of entrepreneurship and that essence of it. I want you to also, how you see your investments in Africa, the entrepreneurship in Africa and in the region. I want you to kind of share with the audience here what you shared with me earlier about that.
So we've invested in Africa, across South and Southeast Asia. And the one thing I can say with absolute passion is there are Sam Altmans in every country. Like nobody has an exclusive right to produce or ability to produce entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. The difference is the resources that those entrepreneurs have access to. Africa, for an example, is a continent of 1.2 billion people. It gets 1.67% of all venture capital in the world. They just don't have access to resources. The result is it's very hard to take the risk to be an entrepreneur, right? And that's where culture comes into it. I call it the sort of, Mom, I'm sitting down at a table with your mother and saying, Mom, I'm not going to get a job, right? And when I graduated college in 1993, I said, Mom, I'm not going to get a job. And they said, do you know how much money we just spent on your education? And I said, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And they said, no, you're not, right? And I did it anyway. But it was hard. My college didn't have an angel fund. I didn't have friends and family behind me. I had to hunt, and I had to hustle, right? And today, I have 3 daughters, and they all want to be entrepreneurs. And when they go to college, there will be angel money behind them. And there'll be friends and family money. And if they go and they build a business and they fail, there will be funds just investing in entrepreneurs who have failed and want to try a second time, and then a third time, and a fourth time. That is de-risking. That's not culture. That is de-risking to an exponential point of view, where people in states in particular understand that success is based on the breadth and diversity of your funnel. The more entrepreneurs with the more ideas, the more successful everybody's going to be, whether you're at private equity stage or whether you're at seed stage. And so what we need to do, in my belief, and what Utopia Capital Management does, is invest in de-risking that moment that somebody walks in to their mother and says, I want to be an entrepreneur. And it's okay, because if I fail, somebody's going to support me through that journey. Not just through bankruptcy, but financially too. And they're going to support me in developing my idea, both pragmatically, with talent and technical skill, but emotionally too, because the entrepreneur journey is lonely and it's hard, right? And we think about all those things when we build businesses. And I think that's what we have to do as funds, if you want to invest in emerging markets and find that next Sam Altman and pretend him not to go work for PwC or some other consultancy or some other bank, but to take a risk. And we have to do that as governments as well, because it takes huge amounts of coordination and huge amount of resources. Interesting.
And with startups, you're always trying to solve a problem. So in Africa, where you're pretty much established, I would say, what are the problems there that we're trying to solve? I mean, even in the region, what are these sectors?
I think that's so the investment thesis question is a really interesting question when it comes to Africa. We don't have the need in Africa to create incremental change. If you're in the US or European market or in Southeast Asian market, you have so much competition around you that you have to be incrementally better than your neighbor, because there's lots of other people around you. In Africa, there's just a lack of business models and business solutions. So you can be hugely successful if you just create the business in the first place, right? It has to be great, and the innovation has to be terrific, but build, right? So when we look at sort of entrepreneurs, we look at do they understand the problem? We stopped investing in entrepreneurs from Stanford or Harvard coming to save the continent because they don't understand the culture, the market, the economy, right? We invest in people who understand the problem and help them build. And I think that's really critical in the sense that it's less about whether they're in AI or are they chasing the next trend that's so relevant around the world. Is the market opportunity big enough, and does the entrepreneur understand it? And that's where we focus.
Interesting. I think my next question is for all of you. And it's about, we've had a few exits in the region. Is there a startup or a company that's now made it far that you think, I should have been a part of that, I should have eyed it? Let's start with you, Dr. Shaikha.
Yeah. I think Kareem was, I mean, at that time it was, I mean, I found it was presented to me and I thought about it, but I didn't have like, I mean, I didn't decide to invest in it. So, I mean, I regret it now. But, I mean, luckily 2 of my partners are the 2 first investors in Kareem. And also my sister is also, I mean, she is one of the first, investor in Kareem. I should have consulted with them at that time, but I mean, I took my decision. And lesson learned is that you need, before taking a decision, you need to have like, I mean, to listen from others, to hear from them and to share ideas and yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Mohsin, even if it's the same answer, I would want to hear it.
I mean, what I would say is a benefit of hindsight, but Kareem, I think, is an important turning point for a number of organisations. I think it served as a wake-up call because, as some of you may know, the original founders of Kareem were homegrown Doha residents. And so to expand their business, they obviously moved to the UAE and continued to develop their company's success there. Had the Fund of Funds program been up and running, I would very much have liked to have capitalised on that and be there for their Series A, Series B and all the way through. But if I take a step back and say, look, I mean, yes, there are missed opportunities, but there is so much potential that I see. And I completely agree with my panellists here that it's not a question of the next Sam Altman. I'm very convinced that this region will produce even better opportunities, and it's putting the resources, putting the framework around, and really the mentorship, the platform that we are enabling alongside our partners within the state of Qatar, and this collegiate effort amongst the GCC that I think will help drive and excel development across many fields.
Yeah. Ru, even if not from the region, outside.
No, I can answer the question, but I can answer it a little differently. I think the problem with scarcity is it makes you chase things, right? And I think you have to plan. And I always remind myself that in 2008, there were no unicorns in China. And in 2011, there were 14, right? Things can change very, very quickly. And the answer to it, and we were talking about time earlier, time is critical. And you have to not be too focused. Is this the year? Is next year the year? Is this the business? Is this the example? You have to think of more. Just do more businesses. Bring more capacity. Bring more capital. Bring more funds. And collaborate and co-create. And so my answer is more.
What about you, Jack? I mean, feel free to name drop here. It's okay.
So I'll answer your question a little bit differently, because I think the region often gets criticized that the big outcomes, whether it's Kareem or Noon and the list goes on, are copycats. I think copycats are great because you have to start somewhere. And so think about it. How many young people worked at Noon, worked at Kareem, made 7 figures, learned how to work at a world-class technology company, and then most importantly, now have this ambition that they want to be the person that starts the next Kareem or the next Noon. So it's almost like you have these little mafias of, coming from the PayPal experience. You have a Noon mafia, you have a Kareem mafia, and they're going to go out and start 10, 20, 100 of these new businesses. And as that continues to evolve, there'll be less copycats, and there might be some Sam Altmans in the mix down the road, but you have to start somewhere. So I think copycats are a great place to start.
And yeah, that's really good, because when I first wanted to do the panel, it was like, oh, maybe Qatar is late to the game. But then a lot of people would say, no, it's not. It's true, like better late than never, because they do have the, a backing of QIA, and there is the landscape. So why not? We learn and we just keep going, I guess. But let's stay on the exit environment here. Dr. Mohsin, how do you see the environment for exits, even globally, as you look around or travel as you do?
Yeah, look, I mean, from the very high level, it's been a difficult environment with the capital markets all but shut. We are now starting to see a change, and so hopefully with Reddit, the IPO of Reddit, things are starting to turn, and through the international portfolios that we manage, we expect this to somewhat normalize and go back to pre-COVID. Within this region, it is much more captive. So if I look at the stats, there's been over the last 5 years just over 3,000 invested in rounds with only 7% exits, and so that is a dismal figure by any task. So I think the work that we're doing, the work that our regional peers are doing, is helping to address this, but it also opens up opportunities for providing liquidity through secondaries, through engaging with corporations in the GCC who have very rich balance sheets and are now, I think, stepping up to the game on providing venture angle from the corporation side, which I think will be a trend that will continue to develop. And of course, through initiatives like QA and through the government and through the broader initiatives like the Startup Qatar or through the QFMA within Qatar itself, these are starting to release some of these bottlenecks and really start getting people discussing. And hopefully will with against a more prosperous macro backdrop, we should start seeing more exits in the market.